Hey everyone, it's Chris.
And Kirsten.
Welcome to Good Thinking Weekly, the podcast where we discuss the best of the best in brands, marketing, and culture.
Thousands of people, top execs from the likes of Complex, Klaviyo, Walmart, Wall Street Journal, and LVMH tune in every single week.
We run a creative consultancy in Good Co, so we know what it takes to build a good brand.
Subscribe on YouTube, your favorite podcast app, and Good Thinking on Substack for more.
All right, let's dive in.
Hello. Welcome to Good Thinking.
Hi,
I
Matt.
have a very special guest.
Hello. Thanks for having me. This is Matt Repicky. I'm the Chief Brands Officer at Tailored Brands, which is the parent company of very well-known retailers like Men's Wearhouse. And yeah, I've been there 6 years. Previously,
I'm excited to chat. I mean, so I've been kind of stalking you. Stalking you? Is that the right word?
I mean,
That's
that's
okay.
how I feel
I'll
I've
take
been
it.
doing.
Yeah.
On the
That's what I've
LinkedIn.
been
No, I
doing.
feel like, this is like the meeting, when you feel like you have a friend, but you've never really met them. I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
Totally.
But I
love it.
feel like I know you from LinkedIn, and you're always giving me like incredibly nice shout outs on Substack, and you're so supportive. And so it's so nice to like put a face to a name and,
Yeah,
and a
likewise.
handle and some love, which is so appreciated. So thanks for coming on, and I can't wait to
Yeah.
chat. I've got so many questions about what you're doing and how you're approaching things, but also I just really like the way you think. So I'm excited to get into it.
Awesome. Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me. It's funny. I don't know if you know Mo Saeed from Mojo Supermarket, which is an advertising agency in New York. And Mo and I have a similar conversation where we'll chat, and it's like, we haven't worked together yet, but we feel like we're of the same mind. And so when you meet those people, it's exciting. So yeah, excited to be here.
It is.
It's pretty great. It's pretty great. And I feel like you and I have some like sartorial introductions to get out of the way. Like I started in menswear. So I started a place called Louis Boston,
Mhm.
which, Joe Abood is actually, it's where he started. So like
Love
I
it.
just have a love of just how thoughtful menswear is and the styling and kind of all of the parts and pieces. And again, like the content that I see and stalk you on LinkedIn, it feels like it's kind of speaking that language. And so it really, really resonates with me. And I think,
That's
you
great.
taking kind of really legacy brands and bringing them back in a way that feels, not just heritage, but really modern. I'm really excited about. Yes, lots to chat about, but wanted to get that out of the way because,
love
there's
it.
some connection there.
Yeah, so I'd
All right.
love to chat. The first thing I want to ask you is like, how did you end up with this job? Because I feel like that's everybody's, like, you're working at this major, Men's Wearhouse, I feel like is basically like the menswear brand, right? Like, it's not the menswear brand that necessary, like it's the one that everybody has touched in some way. And so
Mhm.
that's quite a big job and quite a legacy to walk into. So A, how did you get the job? And B, how are you thinking about it? Because I have a lot of questions.
Yeah, no, I feel so lucky. I went from dream job to dream job. I used to run marketing for the Barbie brand for a number of years, and in its own right, just has such cultural significance. And you're right, Men's Wearhouse. I've been a menswear nerd for a long time, so Kirsten, hear you on that front. I started a blog back when, blogs were what
Love
we
it.
were doing, called Men's Threads, where I was dabbling and talking and writing, and that was while I was actually still working at Mattel. So this was my side hustle. So to be in the role that I'm in today is such a dream come true. And what I love about it is that we are so ubiquitous and we mean something to everybody. And it's not like we're Milan Runway, which has its place and is amazing, but we're talking to consumers all across the United States every single day. And to be able to shape and mold and bring a brand like that into continued relevancy is just super fun.
Yeah, I love that.
Dream job. Like, I know Mattel is like Barbie's dream job. Like that, I always
Sure.
like taking something that's like so significant to so many people, and then that maybe like people sort of think of as like just part of the fabric of something. That's the dream job.
Well, and the challenge on a brand like that is bigger, but I think the reward is bigger as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the audience
If you
larger.
can-
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, if you can get it right. And it means, again, it's like so enmeshed. Like I joke because SNL spoofs Men's Wearhouse all the time. And I love it. I'll take it. It's like, come on, like we're a part of culture when you're in SNL.
Yeah. No, totally. And I do think you know, your title is Chief Brands Officer. And anytime I see that, especially with such a big company, it's like, it tells me that they really get it. Like they really
Mhm.
understand the importance of brand. They're really like, it's significant enough to have somebody your stature in that title. Like that tells a lot, I think.
Yeah, it's you know, I actually sort of shaped the role myself about 4 years ago now, and it was coming out of a place where looking at brand insights, the brands, we have 4 brands, so Men's Wearhouse plus 3 others, but all of them are a little stagnant. And folks knew the brand, but they weren't really gelling with the brand in the way that we wanted. And so I like to call myself our ambassador, if you will. And my job is to really like keep looking ahead at sort of where the brands need to be relative to where the consumer's at and what consumers think of us, and keep breaking things, if you will, and just trying to like, you know, remake them for sort of the age and the day that we're in.
You are, though, an ambassador. I feel like on LinkedIn, you're there wearing Men's Wearhouse and looking great and
Yeah.
talking about it. And I think it's interesting to see. I went to this conference this past weekend, or week rather, and one of the topics was about employee brand and like how important that becomes. You know, in the perfect world, a brand gets somebody like you who is willing to sort of put their face on
Mhm.
the brand. And was that something that you knew going into it that you were going to do, or something that you've evolved into doing? And how is that going?
Yeah, it's definitely not an official role. It is something that, you know, like I said, I love menswear. And it is something that I just sort of stepped into because I thought, well, I want to wear the clothes. I can wear the clothes. I have my own personal style. Not for everybody, but it's there. And, you know, if I can showcase different ways to take our product, then why not give it a try? And it's actually been really interesting to see the response. And, you know, you jokingly said stalking. I'll take it. It's fine. But you know, I post a lot on LinkedIn about the work that we're doing because I want people to see it through my lens and my narrative. But what I do find is that it actually starts to shift for those who are seeing it on that platform, their perceptions of what we're doing in a positive way, largely. So it's fun to be out there. And also it's just a nice way for me to express myself and sort of my own personal style.
And how
Yeah.
does the brand support you doing that? Because that was a big conversation at the conference, was whether
Mm,
you're, well, I guess because you're the chief of brand, like you are maybe your own person who's approving this, but brands are sort of afraid of that, I think.
mm. That's interesting. Yeah, I think for the content that I publish, I am largely self-approving it, but knowing that our executive leadership team is in support of it because it's
Yeah.
all towards, again, the ends of like, let's talk about the things that we're doing. But I think, you know, something that was in your newsletter from last week was around just using employees as creators. And like,
Mhm.
I think that's something we're talking about too. You know, I have 25,000 colleagues working in stores all across the country, and they love our brands as much as I do. And so, how do we give them a platform and let them talk about it in a way that feels organic and authentic to what they care about relative to their jobs?
How would you approach something like that if you were to approve it? Because I think what the conversation was is that so many brands are think that they have this, you know, this lens, right, that they have on the world. And the truth is that nobody has that anymore. Your brand is out of your control, basically.
Hmm.
So do you agree with that? Or are you afraid of that?
I think there's, listen, we've been talking about it internally. I think there are guardrails that you put out there, but I'll say this: like, I think this is really true in 2025, and frankly, it was true 6 or 7 years ago when I was working on the Barbie brand. If you're too precious, people just walk away. Like they don't want to engage because they're like, well, you're just this like really perfect expression of something that I can't actually engage with. And so I think
Mhm.
you need to show yourself that or show the consumer that you're fallible, that like you can make mistakes, that you're willing to get a little messy. Just before we started chatting, I was talking to my team and our advertising agency about our spring 26 campaign. And we were reminiscing how I greenlit putting an actor in tighty-whities on a TV screen for Men's Wearhouse. And that was a risk, but we felt like collectively it was a way to have fun and just wink to the audience that like we don't take ourselves that seriously. And I think for a brand today, if you want to engage with the consumer at large, you need to be able to just sort of let go a little bit.
Well said. Well said. I mean, that was the exact conversation that Chris and I were having, I think, yesterday, definitely this week, around kind of brands being so precious. And like,
Yeah.
it's totally a fallacy. But you seem to really do a great job of balancing those things, of like putting out the risk and doing the things, but then also, and maybe it's just like, again, like I personally love your personal style. So I think there's that, but do a really good job balancing those two things of being able to push the brand, but really like still feel of the brand kind of in a relevant way. Like, how do you with your team kind of put in the guardrails, make those things happen? And how do you see that? Because I think the personal brand within companies like yours is really like one of the most interesting conversations to be had right now.
Yeah. I also acknowledge that I am not necessarily our core consumer. I live in a certain place and I dress a certain way. And so what is fun to me is that I can be expressive about our brand and still have it look very different than a lot of our customers experience and wear our brand. And so, the conversations that I have with my team it's around always being curious. And just because there's something in front of you, don't take that to be sort of the end all be all, if you will. And it's always like reading and poking and learning. And like every one of my offices has always had mood boards because I'm that antiquated, but I love magazine tears on the wall. Thank you. And it's just like finding those sparks and those things that you're like, hey, this is not sort of what's in front of us today, but it sounds interesting and I want to learn more about it. And always kind of just like wrapping your arms around something different, to me, is how we've started to really embrace some of that sort of like brand movement. An example I was chatting about with my team earlier was there's this creator who works for Papa John's Pizza, which, by the way, could you not get more in the wheelhouse of a Men's Wearhouse customer than, eating at Papa John's? And he flips like pie dough in the back room and he's good at it. And so we put him in a suit and he was like throwing dough around, and our customer resonated so like clearly with that. As just this is not something you would automatically assume is a way to sell suits, but we're like, how do we just show up in a place, in a space that just feels organic and authentic?
And how do you, so what's I think Kirsten and I nerd out on the internal culture
100%.
to get that done.
Yes.
That we are often faced with teams is they're like, oh yeah, it's like meeting overload. Every team that we ever go into, it's like they're back to back. I mean, there's literally not a minute to spare in most companies, and I get it. There's a lot of things to be done and too few people to do them. What is the system that you're actually using to allow those insights to actually A, get read, and B, then filter up to you or to whoever needs to hear them?
Yes.
Love that. Love that question. And I wouldn't say it's perfect by any means, but I think the way that we're looking at it today is creating some of that empowerment. There's things the team suggests that I don't necessarily feel, or like, not that they're not right, but I'm not as excited by them as the team may be, but we do them because like everyone has a ton of good ideas and we want to make sure that we're, again, canvassing the customer in the right way. Part of it is, and this isn't like a process so much as it's we're constantly DMing ourselves across my team and I, things that we see that strike us. Again, going back to that like sort of mood board or that like source of inspiration. And I think that's been pretty embedded in the team, is like, hey, if you see something, say something. Now, if you see something and you're like, this is exciting to me, share it. We don't know how we're necessarily going to use it or what it means for our brand today, but at least it's sort of out there in the ether and we're thinking about it. So I think it's about that empowerment of like, hey, we're going to try a whole bunch of stuff and see how it works. And then we also just keep kind of like sharing and keeping each other informed of what one of us, comes across. Our campaign this year, we did a bunch of social content to support what was sort of the main pillars of the TV and video campaign. And some of these social ideas whereby we had our like hero actor carrying a mannequin through a store. And personally, I was like, this seems so wild to me, but going back to not being too precious, going back to like empowering people to like bring forward ideas. And we did it and like people loved it. So amazing. But I think it's like sort of that unlock is, okay, we have to just be open to like, that could have fallen on its face and we would have been fine with that anyway and like moved on to something else. It just happened to work. But I think that like sort of, again, fallibility, risk taking, and encouraging that ideation across the team.
That's amazing. And Chris's question is exactly, as she knows, where my brain goes. And like, we can't talk about culture the entire time, but what you are creating, have created is clearly something that is unique, especially I would say in retail, which we have a lot of experience in. Like, it's hard to be able to do that. And so I think for people listening, for people that are at other brands, like, it feels like, okay, there's great ongoing collaboration that you're doing. You're empowering people and you're supporting ideas and things that come where the team's passionate, even if it's not kind of what you're most excited or passionate about. Is there a meeting, or are there meetings, or is there some type of like, oh, we have this monthly blah, 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 and that really seems to unlock, or we have a newsletter that we share around, or is there anything that's like, oh, this has been amazing?
I wish the answer was yes, because I've tried those things. I've tried the, hey, everybody go off and find what excites you and let's all get together in a room. And to the point of there's too many meetings, like it just falls off the list. And so I used to do, for a lot of my career, every Friday morning, I'd send like a list, if you will, of all the links and all the creative and all the things I found during the week that I thought was interesting. Again, it was sort of like, I think people felt like they were being fed information. And so the way we do it now is it's just truly organic. So there isn't really a rhyme or a reason other than, hey, you see this thing and it may not be relevant for what we're working on today, but like, let's bookmark it and come back to it. And see if it, kind of like makes sense for something we're going to do in the future. I wish it was more process driven. Maybe I don't, because then maybe we'd lose some of the like organicness of it. But like,
I think there's something though to having a collective brain, right?
Yeah.
And a team that, I have a lot of teams who read my newsletter, like multiple people in the team.
Yeah.
And I think they use it somewhat like that. They're just like, I'm like, you guys have seen these things and and it just is a collective brain that you can pull on and you have the same references, and at least helps you have a sense of the same language. You're not like, did you see the J. Crew thing? It's like, we all know that we saw the J. Crew thing, so we don't have to talk about it. When we reference it, no one's getting caught up. So I do think that helps.
Yes. Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And through the J. Crew of it all, the little takeover they did a couple weekends ago in New York, my team and I were all over it. We're like, this is awesome. Like, we're opening a bunch of new Men's Wearhouse stores right now. And so it kind of sparked for us. Obviously, it'll look very different, but what is our kind of content strategy in terms of getting people excited about those stores? And it was sparked from some of the work that J. Crew put out. So yes, you're right. And that we all automatically had seen the same thing. Which is good and bad. Again, I think like the diversity of thought is also as important, that people see things that I don't see. But you're right. We're streamlined around this sort of like, okay, we're all looking at things through the same or a similar lens on behalf of the brand.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I think the diversity of inputs is, I've written about that many times. I think it's...
Yes, you live that. You live that. You live that. All right. We got to move on from
Savannah Bananas?
Oh my gosh. Yes. I'm glad that you saw that one. And I'm hopeful there's more to come. It's one of those things, like they are all over sort of every single feed that I partake in.
So should we give a little background? Like you...
Yes. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't even know. I assume that actually everybody who reads this letter and who listens to this podcast knows what Savannah Bananas is, but it might even be worth just zooming out and saying what they are in a very broad way, and then why you started working with them. Because
sure,
you do have the cultural reference, but not so many brands, especially of the caliber and the seriousness. I would say, I think of Men's Wearhouse as quite a serious brand, and then I think of this brand as very fun. And to me, the demographic makes sense, but only you could see that it makes sense. And how did you make sense of it? I have so many questions.
Thank you for that. And my description of the Savannah Bananas, which I'm not going to do service to, is Harlem Globetrotters for baseball.
Yes.
That you think, it's stunt, it's fan interaction and engagement. The play is not all that serious, but it's, a touring set of teams all around the US, and, started from Savannah and now selling out NFL and Major League Baseball stadiums sort of every week. I had sent it to our head of media, who, by the way, lives in Canada, and she said that she's been on the wait list for tickets for 2 years.
Wow. Yeah.
If that tells you anything just about and so, they've continued to grow just in their relevance to, I'll call it like, American culture. And again, their popularity has continued to grow. And it just, to me, struck me as, and it's interesting that you say Men's Wearhouse is a serious brand, because that's not how I view it. That's not sort of our go forward path or trajectory. I would say it goes back to like, how do we show ourselves to be less serious? And that's how we get people to engage with us differently. But what struck me was, it's a place where like it's our core consumer, it's family friendly, which is always really important to me. Overlap with the audience. They're having fun out there and just like really, really enjoying it. And what kind of caught my attention was this idea of like, how do you merge our brand and some of the IP that they've created? And so this was, again, one of those things on like a Saturday night, I shot off a note to someone on the team and was like, what do you think about this? And he came back a few days later and was like, yep, we've like booked a deal with one of the players. He's going to wear our Chill Flex suit, which is our temperature regulating technology that keeps you cool. And we're like, well, what better place to need to stay cool than running around a baseball diamond? And that's kind of how it came to fruition. And, I think it was, I'm glad that you saw it. I thought it was super fun. We've gotten a lot of great feedback on it. And it's one of those things that like, I think in my experience, oftentimes you want to do the biggest thing up front and get the biggest bang. And then you actually can't make it happen because you tried to like bite off more than both brands can actually like accomplish. And so here it was like, let's start this, let's try this. We're working with one player and then we can kind of see where it goes and continue to build. But yeah, it's one of those zeitgeisty things that at least in my mind made sense, bringing those two brands together.
That's what I like about it though, is that for you, it made sense, right? You know that their overlap is there with the consumer. And so it doesn't really need to make sense to everyone. Like me, I was saying to somebody today, I posted this thing about Paloma wool, right? And it was a motherhood campaign. And what I liked about it, it wasn't about mothers. Like everybody could enjoy that campaign. It was just good art direction. Great. If you're a mother, it really resonated. But if you're not a mother, it was also great. I think that you don't need it to. I think so many brands get stuck in that, like, this has to make sense to everyone. Does this make sense to our consumer? It's like, no, your brand doesn't make sense to anybody. You have this holistic view, but your consumer does not have that holistic view.
Right.
It never does. And so the person who's watching Savannah Bananas is like, oh, this guy's in a suit. That's fun. Like, what's going on? They're the ones who have to enjoy it. You have to make sense of it for yourselves. And that's kind of the end. I think two brands get really confused about trying to make all these dots connect, and it's just not necessary.
Yeah,
I totally agree with that. I think it's like you're overthinking, over engineering, and then you frankly lose the fun and spontaneity of it all. So it's like, let's just, there's this singer-songwriter, Vale, who writes quirky ditties. And again, I don't know that they make sense, but he tours and has a pretty large following. So again, he kind of like came across my feed, asked the team to reach out, and he wrote an original song I'll have to send you after we hang up, about Men's Wearhouse that is kooky, but like I just cannot stop laughing. And again, it's sort of the like, let's just lean into, to your point, Chris, like someone's going to see that and be like, I'm confused, but that's okay, because it's just, again, like, let's bridge these two brands and the ethos of what we're each doing in a way that just like felt kind of fun and different.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I think you're really on to something, Matt, as far as like, there's a lot of takeaways in that for me, the collaboration. I think you really seem to balance this kind of confidence of like, because so many brands, especially big companies, especially retail, is like, well, I don't know, what is this going to turn off the consumer in the Midwest or in the South, or what are they going to think about this? And kind of all of these things that could happen. And I think putting it out there in a way where it's just fun and you saw, what now everybody sees, where there's kind of that overlap. But I think also, to kind of both of your points, there's so many brands that get so caught up in what a collaboration has to be. And it's going to be all the things and it's going to be the new line and we're going to do the things versus just like, let's just try it out in this and kind of see how it goes. Which I think is really, again, I think balancing out kind of this not being precious about the brand, but also having some confidence that continues to allow your brand to be fun, but also elevated, which, as you know, is a really sweet spot to get to.
Yeah, definitely.
And so you're speaking in the ANA about brands and comedy. And when I read that, brands and comedy, Men's Wearhouse, I was like, what's going on? And again, like, that's what I love about it, is that might not be my perception. I follow you and I'm like looking at you, sartorial, Matt. And I've created a lens, but like those two lenses can live together and they're not wrong. So tell me, A, maybe give us a preview about what you're talking about, but B, tell me how you think about comedy. Because comedy is hard for brands, I think. A lot of brands get they're like, we're not a comedic brand. I've been in so many meetings where people are like, well, we just can't be funny. And it's like, you're in the business of entertainment. Like every brand, Every
Right.
brand is in the business of entertainment. Comedy is one lens that you can have for entertainment, and it's not going to mean that you're a silly brand. Like, it's okay. But that is really difficult for people.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm in New York right now in advance of the talk with the ANA. When I get back to my office, I'm going to write a post-it note, make Chris think Men's Wearhouse is funny. So that's my new mission.
Great.
But
Great.
no, I know it's interesting to hear like that perspective. And I would say, if I look at the journey that the Men's Wearhouse brand has been on for so many years, George Zimmer, the founder of the brand, spoke direct to camera and told people in this very like gravelly voice about they're gonna, love the way they look or like the way they look, and he guarantees it. And we do focus groups, and I talk to people who have no right to know who George Zimmer is because they're way too young, and they do. And so it's like we have a tailwind in this brand equity as a result of that work. But coming out of the pandemic, there was a backlog of weddings, and we're a big wedding destination. And so I was hiring like real wedding photographers, and I was doing very heartfelt, emotional work around weddings because that was the tonality that I felt was right for the moment we were in, both culturally and for the business. As weddings sort of like stabilized, it was like, okay, what's next? And like I mentioned, looking around and looking at our insights, felt like people knew us, but they weren't like that engaged. And we thought that comedy was a way to do that. And you're right, and that comedy can be hard, and it's a lot of internal dialogue. And like you're saying, sort of what's the process? There is not really a process other than like you just sit down around a table with folks and they're like, okay, let's hash this out a little bit and like see what our like risk tolerance is. And like I mentioned earlier, I put a guy on TV in tighty-whities, and our CEO at the time definitely had some questions about if that was the right approach, but also gave me the latitude to make the decision. And, so we kind of like came to yep, we're going to try this and do it. So I'll be on stage at the ANA this week with Matt Heath, who's the Chief Creative Officer of Partyland, which is the agency that we work with. And Matt famously previously worked at a different agency and wrote the Arby's We've Got the Meats campaign. And so his comedy chops are kind of through and through. And when we met the Partyland team going through the search process for a new agency, it was sort of an immediate kind of like meeting of the minds, such that we felt like they understood our aspirations and our ambition, but they also understood that like we are a brand that has to connect with and appeal to a very wide range of consumer. And so we couldn't go like completely in like one direction. We had to strike the right balance, like you acknowledged, and feel like we've done that. And the work has been resonating and working and doing all the things larger that we wanted to do. Just earlier today, we were all talking about what does spring 26 look like and where do we take the comedy from here. Really excited by like what we've been able to generate with that. And again, I think ANA is interested in us talking about it because I think a lot of people are like you, Chris, and they don't look at Men's Wearhouse and think like, okay, this is not a funny or comedic brand. But to your other point, like we do want people to feel engaged. And so why not? And for this brand at this moment in time, it's the right place to be.
And I think that is so there's another podcast that's coming out today. So this will have come out by the time this podcast comes out. But at the conference, somebody said something to me that was so obvious, felt like, sometimes you hear something obvious and then you're like, oh yes, of course, that's obvious, but it's someone articulates it. And they were like, our job as people who build brands is to retrofit into the moment, right? Like you can't just force the moment. You can't force, heartfelt, sentimental wedding season to carry on for 10 years when people is not there, like there's a lot of wedding fatigue. Everybody's like, I can't go on all these destination weddings. Like my wallet can't take it anymore. Like please stop. But there's also comedy in that, I think we as a culture need a lot of lightheartedness right now. So I think it's really brave, but it's super smart. And you're not clearly not afraid of pivoting, which is, again, I think so many people are like, oh my gosh, is this the destination that we need to be going in? And it's like, this is the destination for now. Like in 3 years, the culture will have changed and we will have to retrofit into that culture. And that's the magic of building a brand. Like you have to find the moment that you're in and find how you fit into the moment.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I've just always assumed that was my job as a marketer is to do exactly that, right? And it's like I always look at it like I can feel and touch the brand that I'm like working on and shepherding, and doing that relative to what is happening out in the world. And the way that you know what's happening out in the world is that you read things like, the Substack that you publish. And it's things like, listening to podcasts. It's like going and buying magazines. It's traveling. Like all the inputs that I use and my teams use is sort of that like ether that allows us to say, okay, where do we want this brand, this thing to go relative to what's happening out in the world and where the consumer's at. And I just have always felt like that is
Well, you're ahead of your
what needs to be done. Well,
Yes.
I'll take it.
Yeah. Yeah. I would love off of that. I absolutely agree with you. Clearly, would love to know like what are the podcasts you're listening to? Who you're very active on LinkedIn? Like who are you following? Like all of those parts and pieces of
Yeah.
where you're getting your inspiration and your insights.
Yeah. I mean, like many people, I'm a voracious reader of Lauren Sherman over at Puck for all things fashion. Ben Dietz, incredible just in terms of, again, it's that amalgamation of like things that are happening in the world that I find incredibly useful. Calvin Leung, the head of creative at Gap, his Insta like just keeps me entertained constantly, which again, I think just off to the side, what Gap is doing right now is like really fascinating and impressive in a lot of ways. And so Calvin and his team I know are like always shooting, capturing, doing a new project. So like that's a source of inspiration for me as well. And then, like I said, I'm in New York this week. Casa Magazine is on the list, but it's like there are so many publications and a lot of them are European at the moment that just give me styling inspiration. And it's one of those things like our customer's probably not going to be into what I'm suggesting for another 3 years, and that's cool. We'll just park it to the side. But it's just like staying connected to, the way people are shooting editorial and bringing some of these pieces to life.
Yeah. Well, and obviously development of anything in retail is much before the consumer ever realizes that they're thinking about it.
Yes.
That is part of
Yes.
magic of what you have to do. You have to
Yeah.
manage now, right? And so you're here now and you're like, oh, comedy is our moment, but you're also over here knowing that 3 years from now, like this is coming down the
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's where, you mentioned that you were at a conference last week and I was at E-Tail last week speaking in San Diego, and I'll be back in New York in a couple weeks for advertising week. And it's always fun to be able to tell your story of what you're working on, but it's also the interaction with other people who are doing something similar, albeit for other brands, because it's that like just brain meld and like trading of information that I always think is really helpful, because I can kind of sit alone, obviously amongst a really talented team, but kind of sit alone in my little ether of like, okay, here's what we're doing for Men's Wearhouse, but just like poking and prodding and like hearing what other people's challenges are, I always find to be incredibly helpful as well.
Yes, we've heard that a lot at Cannes. Everyone was like, I just want to get in the like space with some peers, and so that
Right.
there's that
Community.
and being with your team. I think it's all really, really important. All the inputs.
Community collaboration, all of those parts. And it's interesting talking about Gap, who I think we all feel like is really resonating with some things, really doing things, and they're really tuning into culture, and you guys are really tuning into culture and doing it in two obviously very, very different ways, which I think is just interesting thing to note. So where kind of have things been from really in the retail world, right? I wonder if Men's Wearhouse of the brand could have done kind of humor 10 years ago. Right? It might not have been right for the brand at that particular time. And then where do you think things are kind of going if you can bust out your crystal ball a bit?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I had the benefit of working with Richard Dixon for many, many years while I was at Mattel. So the work that he's doing, not just at Gap, but the whole portfolio, I've experienced and lived his sort of playbook. So not to say that you're seeing that show up at Men's Wearhouse, but like I'm very cognizant of like the benefit of, again, tapping into culture and figuring out how to do that in the way that's right for your customer, which, as you acknowledge, is different for us than it is for them. I think as I look at where things go, there's a couple of things on my mind. One is, the media landscape continues to be more and more fractured. I read, likely was something that you all published, about how brand websites won't exist in 10 years, right? And I keep talking about that internally, and people I think are a little scared to hear it, but I actually believe it's real. And so as consumers are like showing up in different platforms and shopping differently, like what does that all become? And I've been reading a lot lately on like advertising won't exist by the year 2030, and I don't think that that's wholly true, but you have to kind of keep moving on how are you showing up and like where and what are you messaging. So like that's certainly on my radar. And then just like hopefully this is my only mention of this term in this, whole conversation, but the sort of AI of it all, and just what are ways that we're harnessing or testing or playing or using some of the technology to just again like create differently, connect with our consumers differently. And so that's something that like I don't think we fully know yet what that is going to become in the years to come, but it's obviously like top of mind for everybody, and it's something that is almost like too constantly discussed, which is why I was like we can limit it here today, but it is something that we're talking about and trying to figure out, okay, what does it mean?
Yeah.
Well, if you're
I
not
knew it
just
was going to,
yeah, gotta discuss it.
I knew it was going to be the A word, and I didn't know if it was going to be AI or authentic. So,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the overplayed word. But I do think every brand needs to be thinking about AI. Like the truth is it's not going to come.
Yeah.
It's happening. It's here. Like,
Right.
there's no avoiding it. And one of the things I wrote about this weekend was Google was like, oh yeah, Google's going to be able to like shop. And the agents will be able to shop like out of stock items that you've already approved. And I was like, yeah, that's not how consumers behave. And so my big thing lately is like, you can do all the AI you want, but if you don't know how people think, which I actually think legacy retailers like actually have an enormous amount of knowledge and probably need to not forget all of that knowledge. It's almost like when performance marketing became big, right? A lot of the brand stuff that people had learned over time and the stuff you're talking about now with cultural relevance, like it was as if it was like, yeah, that stuff, like that's not relevant anymore. Like forget all those things. And then a bunch of people were raised on not ever having any experience or any opportunity, not just experience, but like not even asked, or even if they wanted to, they were not allowed to have an interest in it. And to me, I fear with AI that some of the basics of retail, which retail hasn't really changed in its fundamentals for decades, and there's a reason for that because people are not really that evolved. And of course they will change, but the way that people think really probably won't change.
Well, and I'd like to think that yes, there's probably some underlying ways that you can use AI or technology to facilitate the flow of product to your store, so on and so forth. But one thing that I do feel is true, and you keep seeing it, is there's younger generations who want to go to the mall. They want to go shopping. Like Men's Warehouse is a business such that like you need help trying it on, and like service is a through line that sets us apart from anybody else. And I think a lot of brands, including ourselves, have tried, oh well, let's do this like virtual measurement system, and people don't want to like stand in front of their camera at home and get their bodies measured and then have a suit show up. Like they want to go in and have an expert who's trained to do this, do it properly, right? And like that tactile experience is still really important in a range of categories. And so I think that's the part of like, fine, like let's utilize technology to like improve the overall sort of like end-to-end flow, but I think there's still going to really be significance in people just want to engage and interact and like touch the thing and like be with friends and so on and so forth. And so I think that's what's I'm curious to see sort of like how that continues to like swing and shift. And it may not look like it did in the 80s, the 90s, early 2000s, right? I think it's again seems to be more experiential, and like brands and the retailers are showing up differently, but I think it's still going to be really, really important.
Yeah. But like the fact that people like to shop for suits, I'm going to assume in not on their own. Like I've been invited on suit shopping expeditions like more times in my life. Like it's like, will you come with me? Like, is anyone going to come with me to do
Oh my
this
gosh.
very important thing? Because it's like it's a lot of money, this thing, and you're going to have it for a long time. And so it's like, well, that's a fundamental. That's probably not changing. Like, doesn't matter with AI. Like, that's not really going to change. Like that behavior is still real.
And I think it's like one particular industry, tailoring, and then like this is where I geek out on it, is like it's the measurement, it's the being in the dressing room, it's the like, oh, putting this shirt with it and this, and like pushing the things, and it can be leveled up so much by having that experience versus just, it's not like apples to apples. And well, you could have an in-person experience, you could have a online experience. It's like it's really where experiential I think comes in and will never go away, because there is just something about it. There's something very emotional about it when you really do that. Okay, I'd love to before we get into quickfire, one more A is activewear. I think it's fascinating that Men's Warehouse just launched activewear. It's a seemingly somewhat saturated category. Like talk to us about how you're going to do something different and unique, which I have no doubt is going to happen.
Yeah, it was interesting. Like it is obviously saturated. It's not necessarily what people think of us for. But, I think one of the insights is that we have, unsurprisingly, relatively low awareness about the fact that we already sell casual clothes. So suits aside, we have polo shirts, jeans, sweaters, chinos, and people just don't think about us all the time for those things. So part of it is, how do we raise the visibility? And our advertising work has been meant to do that, and it's been successful over the past 18 months. So one part of it was what's the extension of casual clothing that we just don't currently cover? I think the other piece of it is, I'd mentioned earlier, we have this line of suiting called ChillFlex that is, again, using temperature regulating, and consumers, by the way, now are coming in asking for it by name, which is when you really know that your advertising has worked. So that's exciting. But we've expanded that technology across a range of products, including activewears. To me, it felt a really interesting, and I came back from a meeting with our design team in New York, and I talked to my graphic design team and said, we need to create an architecture and a franchise around the fact that we can take him from every moment of his day. It's your gym clothes to your errands to your socks and underwear to your suiting to your sport shirts, all to keep you temperature regulated. And so to me, there's something actually again, from the sort of branding standpoint, inherently really interesting about how do we wrap our arms around this entire kind of technology and get the customer just used to thinking about us for those things. So I think it's serving a couple different purposes. And then you're right, it is admittedly, a lot of folks can go to Nike, to Lulu, to any number of other, to Viore. But the hope is that the service that we provide in all of our stores is not just for when you're buying a suit, it's for everything. And so how do we win there, whereas these other brands that I just mentioned likely can't? And then two, again, how do we make it really just understandable for the consumer that oh, you like this product from Men's Wearhouse for this reason? Well, here's a slew of other things that kind of treat you in the same way.
It makes
So
complete sense.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, I think about I have a lot of family who live in Texas, right? So heat regulation is it's like a lifestyle down there.
Yeah.
And if they know something works, then you're actually just tapping into that mindset, right? You just have that consumer and you're just taking them on that journey. And again, it comes down to the technology, and it doesn't have to be every single consumer is oh, they're going to buy Men's Wearhouse athletic wear. They're not. But to a particular strain, and probably to a big belt of very hot areas, once you have that trust that it actually works, knowing all the men in my life too, that they're what time of year shoppers, suddenly it's you get a whole new wardrobe in one day. And I love to shop like that. So to just have oh, I dip my toe in, I come out with my entire wardrobe and I leave, and you actually have the technology pulls you through it. It just, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. No, I'm excited to see. Early reads are the consumers responding. I'm excited to see where it goes. And as you may have seen on LinkedIn, I spent a weekend trying the pieces out myself. And yes, I am speaking on behalf of the brand, but also I really liked it and thought it was comfy and wearable and kept me cool. So yeah, we'll see where it goes. But again, I think it's a way to just keep extending and expanding what people think about us.
Yeah. I love that. And I love that you're thinking about it not as just an add-on or well, this is the advertising campaign we're going to do to launch the thing and da-da-da-da-da. But it's really it's an overall positioning of the brand. And so it's a yes and within both of those. And I love the way that you're thinking about that. Okay. Chris, anything more? Can we jump to quick fire? All right. All right, Matt. Okay. Here we go. 3 things every brand should do.
Yes. One of them I've been talking about, it's staying connected to your consumer. I think it's just I talk to 300 men every single week about what they think about men's wear, how they're stay connected. Again, I mentioned this before, but always be questioning, be willing to pick apart your work. Don't I'm never satisfied. We do something, it's out the door, and I'm already okay, how do we make it better? Which is, not always easy for a team to hear, but I think it's important. And, we were mentioning, find new ways to show up. What is unexpected? You can have your playbook, but, we are running on TV right now, which if you'd asked me this 5 years ago, I would have been you're crazy, but we're doing it and it's working really well. So it's always just, keep looking at where you can show up with the consumer in a new or different way.
I love that.
What's your biggest learning? What's the one thing that you would do differently in your career, in your entirety?
As I look back, and we talked about how I've worked on legacy brands, and legacy brands are normally part of legacy organizations. And I think you become really good at navigating the internal politics of it all to get things done. I would say one thing that as I go forward, I want to work on being better at is pushing those provocative ideas. and not always having to feel like, okay, we're going to I don't want to call it the lowest common denominator by any means, because listen, I've been able to like deliver, I think, some pretty impactful work, but there's always that one thing that you're like, no one's going to go for this. And it's going to be too hard to like push it through the system, if you will. And so I think one of my learnings has been like, yeah, you're working on these big brands and you can steer them and that may take a while, but also like take those shots that may seem a little out of bounds, but if you believe in it, give it a try.
I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel that in my career as well.
Yeah.
If you could collaborate with one other brand on something, who would it be and why?
So in what is probably an adjacency to some degree to Savannah Bananas, I've long had WWE on my radar. Kirsten laughs.
I love it.
Their audience overlap with ours is incredible and they have fun. And, no one takes it too seriously, but you have an incredibly like rabid fan base. And I just think that there's something, a really interesting intersection. I, had some conversations with WWE. They invited me to one of their events. And it was one of those moments where you're looking around thinking, we're all seeing the same thing, except everybody else is like on their feet going crazy for what's happening. And it just struck me as like, there's something inherently interesting there that I think Men's Wearhouse could benefit from participating in.
I love that.
So good.
If there were one celebrity spokesperson for the brand, who would it be?
Okay, so I don't have an answer for that, but I'll tell you whenever we ask consumers, it's either the Dos Equis guy, because I think he sounds and looks like George Zimmer,
Okay.
or Idris.
Ooh. Yeah.
I think there's like a sartorial aspiration, I think is where it's coming from. But yeah, he comes up a lot.
Yeah.
I love
He's
that.
also great because he is very suave, but he also doesn't take himself too seriously. Like
Right,
he also has a great time in life and is not like trying to not have a good time.
Right.
Yes. Amazing. Okay. And the last one word that sums up your brand.
This may be deflating, but consistent. I think like in a world where like you want to know what you're going to get and you walk through the doors and the service is consistent, the product's consistent, the total experience is consistent. And so that's something that like I'd love to strive for, such that like, listen, we can be menswear nerds and like try all sorts of crazy things, but the average guy, he just wants to like look good for this thing he has. And knowing that we can deliver on that for him, I think it's important.
Yeah.
Love
It was
that.
actually another topic of conversation at the conference. It's like consistency is completely underrated now.
Right.
But I think it's consistent. I think you're doing a good job of being inconsistent, like keeping it different. But then the things that really matter, like the service, the products that they can rely on, the things that they need at the end of the day, those are very consistent. They know they can always get them. I think that's really smart.
And I love that that's kind of where you're rooted. You're doing all of these fun and interesting things and pushing things, but you still are rooted in that. And I think that's really powerful.
This was super fun. Thanks for coming on. And I feel like I learned a lot and you shared a lot. And if there are any other brands listening to this who run legacy brands and who are also dealing with this and have gems to drop, please drop them in the comments.
Yes, we'd love to hear
how he handles it, because obviously he's an expert. But yeah, really appreciate you coming on and sharing. It was really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love the conversation, Matt. Thank you.
So much fun. All right.
That was it for this episode of Good Thinking. Don't forget to tune in next week.
If you found this valuable, subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast app.
And don't forget to read on Substack for even more insights.
And if you really liked it, drop us a heart. We'd love to hear from you.
Ciao. Until next time.
Okay, stay tuned for a lovely conversation with Matt Repicky. He is just from Men's Wearhouse and other brands, tailored.
Yes.
He was such an awesome human. We've followed him for a while on LinkedIn. He's super inspiring, doing the things, and even more so having the conversation of culture, collaborations, teams. There was just so many takeaways for people running brands.
Yeah. Takeaways that were really, really, I felt very actionable, like things that you should be doing that weren't big lifts. Actually, he's like, I've tried the big lifts and that didn't work. So I really liked how he was thinking about things. He talks a lot about how you have to find the moment and culture that you're in and understand. And even though you're a legacy brand that has the consistency, you have to come to the moment. There's so much interesting stuff in this pod. I really can't wait for you to listen.
Yeah, he does a great job of really balancing kind of the being courageous and pushing the things and having some humor, but still being elevated and heritage. And that's a really fine balance. And it really feels like he creates that balance in everything that he does. So I think it's a great one and a lot of takeaways for people to listen. So enjoy.
Enjoy.